What I have here is a selection of scraper planes. Now, if you're going to, when you are finishing the surface of a piece of wood at the end of one of your projects, before you put the finish on it, most people will use sandpaper, or sometimes a power sander. That's the standard way to smooth the surface these days. The truth is that when you're using sandpaper, even if it's very fine sandpaper, like triple aught, you're still basically making a bunch of scratches in the wood. And even though they may be very fine scratches, you're not going to get a perfect surface unless instead of sandpaper, you use a scraper. A scraper will give you that absolutely perfect mirror finish on the wood. A lot of people use scrapers by hand. They're just basically a piece of metal with a burr turned on the end, so you just scrape it by hand. But there are also a wide variety of scraper planes that are available to hold the scraper in place to kind of reduce the fatigue on your hands when you're scraping. This was the standard Stanley line was the number 12 series. This particular one is a number 12 1/4. They also made a 12 1/2 and 12 3/4. And the 12 1/4, the distinction about that was a little narrower than the number 12. So to make it a little easier to use. They typically had these rosewood handles on them. They have an adjustment mechanism so that you can get your scraper at different angles to the work. This was the workhorse of the Stanley scraper plane line, and works very well. They're still very widely used. A lot of planes were made, instead of being made of with the wooden handles, it would be made just out of cast iron. This particular one is made by Sargent, which is one of Stanley's major competitors. You can see it's very similar. It's got the tilting handle. It's got the tilting angle of the blade here. Instead of a wooden rosewood handle, it's got cast iron handles built into it. The other thing to notice about this is that it's got a wooden sole, which a lot of users thought gave you less friction and made them easier to use. Some of the ones in the Stanley line, the number 12 line, also had wooden soles, although the number 12 1/4 didn't. But this particular Sargent one does have a wooden sole on it. That's the standard design of a scraper. Stanley also made a number of scrapers that were in the shape of a more common bench plane. This is one of the rarer ones. This is the number 212. You can see it's actually pretty small. It's got a knob on it to make it a little easier to use. It doesn't have a handle. It's got the tilting blade. So this is actually was not all that popular with woodworkers, so it's pretty rare these days. But they made a series of planes that more closely resembled a bench plane than these type of scrapers. And finally, scrapers are one of the tools that a lot of woodworkers made their own, and sometimes they made them very fancy. Here's a nice one that we call a ram's horn, which you can tell pretty clearly from the design. And it's made out of nice laminated wood. And it's got the scraper mounted in a cast bronze or gunmetal clamp here. The problem with these is that there's no way to make them really with an adjustable blade angle. So they have a fixed blade angle. But nevertheless, a lot of woodworkers preferred to make their own, and you'll find some of these pretty fancy. This is a really nice one because of the lamination on it. So these are just 4 examples of different kinds of scraper planes, and these are all listed in our fall auction.